Welcome to the LA Real Estate Podcast, your podcast on buying and selling real estate in Los Angeles. Today, I have Justin.webb from the Skelton Group helping me host, and we will be doing part 2 of our interview with Chris Rippy, the building inspector extraordinaire. Also, we're going to be talking about one of our favorite haunts in Los Angeles, Highland Park. You've heard us talk about it on the show many times, but we're going to do an area spotlight on Highland Park today, as well as we're going to talk about the 5 major systems in your home. So, Justin, 2024, hey.
Can't believe it.
Can you believe it's been 4 years since 2020?
Was that the pandemic year?
I don't remember. It's just like a fog brain. I don't remember anything that happened that year. It's all out of my head. So listen, 2024, someone listening is thinking to themselves right now, I've made a New Year's resolution to buy a home this year. So we got to get them going. Step 1, mortgage broker. Contact us. We'll hook you up with a great mortgage broker. Step 2, awesome real estate agent. We'll hook you up with an awesome real estate agent. Us. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you just solved all their problems.
There we go. 2024. You're ready for it. Justin, let's talk about one of our faves, Highland Park.
Sure thing.
Highland Park is northeast LA. It borders Eagle Rock, Cypress Park,
Glassell Park,
Mount Washington.
South Pasadena, Montecito Heights.
Such a neat pocket of northeast LA. Now, to be fair, prices in Highland Park have gone kind of bananas.
Yeah.
So it's a very expensive place now to buy. However, the best thing about Highland Park is walkability. You're able to walk to restaurants and bars and coffee shops, and it's a really great place to live if you are a socializer, if you like to go out, you have a fun nightlife. It's a great spot. You can walk home.
100%. Also the train.
Yeah, that's right. Your access to so many things, and you're very close to downtown. Really accessible to a lot of different areas. Great restaurants. Great scene, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you can just, it's one of the few places in Los Angeles that you can just go on a Friday night and just walk down New York Boulevard and you'll probably end up having a good time without any plan whatsoever. I remember the first time I went there, right when it was starting to get kind of hipster, and I was just blown away by the street energy, just how many, in the evening, how many people were just walking around, how many stores were still open. It was like a party atmosphere. Like it was felt like being in the Village or something.
It's fun. And yeah, people are out, you run into friends. I actually was at Hippo last night, Hippo Restaurant, with a good friend of ours, Kenya, also an amazing realtor who has been on the podcast. We had a great dinner. Ran into people, of course, we knew there. And another one of my favorite breakfast spots there is Kitchen Mouse. Have you ever eaten at Kitchen Mouse?
I haven't, but it's so funny. That's it's like a cliche at this point. Like every Highland Park listing has to be like 3 minutes from Kitchen Mouse.
Yeah, totally. You base your listing right up on how far away, how many miles away from Kitchen Mouse you are, or how many minutes walk. But when we had our kids and I was working a lot, my husband was working a lot, we used to go to Kitchen Mouse for date breakfast. So we go on a date breakfast because date nights were just not realistic. And we're not going to pay $25 for a babysitter so we can both be tired and go sit and stare across a table at each other. So instead, breakfast dates worked better for us. And we used to go to Kitchen Mouse all the time. Great coffee shops, great scene, lots of new little shops, clothing stores and jewelry stores and stationery places, and just a very cool, hip, creative vibe. This is where you will see lots of sleeve tattoos. You're going to see really tight pants, ironic band t-shirts, all that kind of stuff. But It's hip. Highland Park is very, very hip. But also, since the hipness has come in, it has also become very expensive. But I really like Highland Park for It's diversity. It's a very diverse segment of Los Angeles. Lots of different ages, lots of different types of people coming from all different types of places, lots of different culinary choices. And I think it's a really beautiful bouquet of what Los Angeles is. And so if you haven't explored Highland Park and that's your vibe, you like creativeness and you like music and you like a scene, Highland Park is a location you absolutely should consider.
I'd say it's sort of become what Silver Lake used to be, and its pricing has followed, but it's still cheaper than Silver Lake. So if you're looking for that vibe, you can't afford Silver Lake anymore. You've been priced out of Silver Lake / Echo Park. I'd say a lot of the culture that used to be there, as far as the bands and the youth culture and all that stuff, is most of it's moved to Highland Park. As far as I know, I don't know. I'm an old dad at this point, but that's what it seems like to this old dad.
No, you're very true about that. We used to always the buyers that couldn't afford in Silver Lake, we would show them Highland Park always. Highland Park, Eagle Rock, Cypress Park, Glassell Park.
Cypress Park now is really taken the middle. Now it's becoming what Highland Park was a couple years ago. So it's like, these kind of good go in a row. If you could predict it, you could make $1 zillion.
So Highland Park, amazing houses and very big variety of houses.
So we got lots of really pretty craftsmen. And Garbanzo, interesting footnote, actually named for the garbanzo bean. It used to be garbanzo fields there way back. But anyway.
Whoa, you just blew my mind.
That just blew your mind. I don't know.
This.
I don't know how it turned into Garbanzo, but Garbanzo is like a historic district, so tricky because you can't actually change some of those houses. They're protected as far as the outsides, but they're just beautiful. So as far as the construction, you just can't believe they're still standing.
They're so beautiful, those homes. And then we have some Spanish. We've got some really nice Spanish homes.
A lot of new
very
builds.
Desirable. We
Tons
also,
of craftsmen.
Craftsmen's. We've got Spanish. We also have mid-centuries in part of Highland Park.
Yeah.
So those obviously are newer than the houses built, in the early 1900s. But there's some mid-centuries, and actually some of my clients have bought some beautiful mid-centuries. Back in the day, Los Angeles was really where the cutting edge architects lived and built. And so we have this amazing, again, bouquet of these gorgeous homes, different styles. And really, my favorite part is working with couples where one person loves a craftsman and the other one hates it and they want a mid-century. And then you have to find a perfect house that meets both of their needs. So that's a little rough. But yeah, you have plenty to choose from in Highland Park. And that's a really neat thing about Highland Park. And it's fun just walking down the streets and seeing these gorgeous homes.
There's also different zones, right? So we mentioned Garbanzo, the historic district, but on the north side that borders Eagle Rock, it's it's really quiet and canyony, and it's kind of hilly, and it's really mellow and beautiful. And you can just zip down and be at all the restaurants we were just talking about in a minute or two. So that's really cool. And then as up on Mount Washington, as it borders Mount Washington, there's some really wild streets there, I guess I'd call it. Kind of almost like lawless, dirt road stuff, and just some really funny stuff. So lots of different zones, but most people would know just kind of the grid there in the middle with all the hip restaurants.
And I would say if you're not super familiar with Highland Park, really just go on the weekend, drive around, see the scene, park, go for, have something to eat. Grab a coffee and just go for a walk and just, get to know the neighborhood. It's really cool. You'll probably make some friends if you're nice and you smile. Or you could be some kind of surly and people just think you're, going through your blue period as a musician or something. Yeah. And then you'll probably make friends doing that too. But check out Highland Park. Put it on your radar if it's not.
Buyer's tip: if you do not want the listing photos for the house that you're buying to be on the internet forever, make sure to tell your agent before you close. Because if you close, it's going to be too late to remove those from the MLS listing. They'll be up there forever. So if you there's a lot of celebrities here, a lot of people who kind of don't want their interiors known. I've had multiple requests from clients to remove it. And just make sure to get it in before you close, because if you've already closed, it's too late.
This is part 2 of our interview with Chris Rippy. If you want to hear the first part, you have to go back an episode and listen to the last one. And what about things to look for? Let's say, because we do talk about the 5 major systems in a house. What are some things that you would say are commonly seen in roofs?
On a roof, well, I think the most common thing that we find, whether it be related to the initial installation of the roof or just the deterioration over time, we'll find bonding is typically an issue that we find with a composition shingle roof. If the installation was done, if there was less care taken with that installation, you'll find that there's issues with the shingles bonding to one another. And of course, a good wind comes along that can create some problems with that. And then, of course, obviously age, the overall deterioration of the roof, exposing a fiberglass base, that type of thing, giving us an indication as to how old that roof is. And then, of course, general maintenance, flashings, for instance, any area where there may be a hip or a valley meet together. You'll have an area that is exposed where the mastic has come away, and these just require regular maintenance. I tell everybody every 3 to 5 years up on the roof and do the maintenance. And more often than not, this is where we see the problems with a roof. Roofs typically don't leak in the middle of what we call the run. They do leak at these joints or these intersections, and those are areas that need the regular maintenance.
And then I imagine you have some comments on gutters and drainage in general, because water is the big killer. Even when we're talking before about foundations, water is the killer, right?
It is, and I think both of you have heard me say this over the years, that the number one killer of all homes is absolutely moisture and how to keep it away from the house. So that's absolutely correct. Gutters can create a problem. And what's interesting is that it's the one component that isn't always on everybody's mind. People think of the roof system as just the roof, but there are so many other aspects, interconnected aspects of that can lead to problems. And of course, gutters are one. We've got gutters that aren't pitched or sloped properly, so they are not draining. They are not kept clean, obviously. And one of the biggest issues that we find is the downspouts. As it meets the ground area, they typically just drain right at or very near the foundation, which again leads right back to the initial statement about moisture. And if any of that moisture is allowed to sit alongside of the foundation, it will eventually find its way in, and we're the ones that get to see the effects of that.
And then what about plumbing, Chris? What are some of the things that you see frequently that are items to be addressed in these old houses? Because that's another thing. In Los Angeles, some of our houses are over 100 years old. So what are some of the plumbing things you see? What's a big deal and what's not a big deal?
Well, I think, and again, there's a little bit of a range there, with the types of houses that we inspect. Obviously we do flips. And what we find there sometimes is, not all the attention to detail that needs to be placed on plumbing. There's a level of importance, and so we will find problems there, almost always with installation. And some of those can be a big deal, and some are not. And of course, we typically would recommend a plumber to come in and get a look at that. And then on the other side of that, of course, it's just age. We do an awful lot of older homes. And of course, as they get to be 75, 80, 100 plus years old, the plumbing materials are not designed to last that long. And so if we're talking about cast iron drain lines, galvanized plumbing, typically what we see is a failure as a result of age. On both the supply side, whether it's galvanized or other types of material. And again, primarily it would be galvanized for us here. And then, of course, on the drain line side. So How extensive really just ranges. It really depends, I should say, on how much attention or how little attention has been paid to that. Whether it's by our friends, the flippers, or whether it's just someone who's lived in the house for decades and has done little to no upgrading. I think that expense-wise, really what, at least in my experience, both as an inspector and as a former builder, is with older drain lines, the expense to repair those, to replace those, can be sometimes very high. Unfortunately, you're dealing with limited space underneath a home. Sometimes you are forced to open up walls. And of course, in some cases, you have to excavate because you've got a line buried below the earth. So that situation can certainly be a big ticket item. On the supply side, we can definitely see some expense there, no doubt. But from my experience, it seems to be primarily on the drain, waste, and vent side.
Mm-hmm.
We talk for a second about the common materials and just kind of what a buyer would be looking and go, oh, that's copper, or that's PEX, or that's galvanized steel, or that's a cast iron, sewage line, or that's a plastic sewer line, and kind of, what's the ideal situation they should be looking for?
Well, I mean, obviously with the older homes, we were basically given galvanized plumbing and on the supply side, and then on the drain, waste, and vent, cast material. And so obviously our upgraded materials are copper. Copper's been around for an awful long time, but of course, keep in mind there are different grades of copper. You talk to a good qualified certified plumber, and they have their own ideas on what is acceptable and what isn't. And typically there are 3 grades of copper that we have access to here in California. And there are really only 2 that most qualified plumbers will commit to using. One of them is a much softer, much thinner material and not commonly used, but unfortunately we do find it used, and especially in our flipped homes. And that's something that as an inspector, we want to identify and present to the client. Other types of material, PEX, cross-linked polyethylene. PEX, of course, is its trade name. This is a wonderful material, but again, different grades of it. And again, you can talk to a plumber about that. They'll give you their opinion on what works and what doesn't. But this is a wonderful material, great for repipes and remodels where you want to limit the amount of construction, meaning opening up walls and cavities, that type of thing. So it's a wonderful type of material. As a matter of fact, we're building a lot of our new homes in the state of California with this material. Malleable, flexible, reasonably easy to install, and you can get it just about anywhere, which is a really nice feature for the plumbers.
Well, for the mountains, it doesn't freeze, right?
That's correct. Pretty nice.
And then, Chris, what about electrical, like addressing electrical? So we have some of these very old homes with old panels. What do you look for when you see these old panels as far as it being safe or any things that you notice? And the one thing I do see in a lot of inspections is double tapping of the wires. I've seen that over and over and over the years.
Right. And strangely enough, I'm in between inspections right now, and we had plenty of it on the first one today.
Point proven. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. With electrical, there's a number of things we look for, obviously. Now, we've got a number of panel manufacturers that we're on the hunt for. Both of you are very familiar with these names, of course, Zinsco and Federal Pacific, or FPEs, and of course the stab locks, even some of the Bulldog pushmatic breaker systems. And while some of them may have never been definitively determined to be defective, the problems with these panels are widely known, both to contractors, builders, and inspectors alike. So we're certainly on the hunt for that. We're also looking for, of course, with the older homes, knob and tube wiring, which, again, I think gets a bit of a bad rap, but we all need to be cognizant of the fact that this material, like any other material or component, will degrade over time, and that's where this type of wiring becomes an issue. It is a cloth wrapped wiring, and of course, what happens to my shirt after 75 or 80 years? answer that question, and you'll know exactly what happens to the sheathing on this wiring. And obviously, we have many more demands from our electrical system than we ever have in the past. And so something we need to be cognizant of as well. We're lots of computers and large appliances, many things, and can really stress an older system. So these are things that we absolutely look for. Beyond that, it's pretty basic stuff. We're looking for instance, you mentioned the double tapping. There are some electricians out there that feel like this is an acceptable practice, but of course, keep in mind, as inspectors, we follow the National Electrical Code, and there is information in there that is clear about not double tapping. And what essentially that is having more than one conductor or wire to a breaker. Obviously, that would be potentially stressing or overloading that one breaker. We see it quite a bit. It is almost a daily event for us. We see it quite a bit.
So somebody wants to add another run to their house, maybe put lights in the garage or something, and they go, I'm out of breakers. So
I'll just add another one in this one.
Yeah.
And if I may say, what we have now is that there is a couple of breaker manufacturers, and I believe, and don't quote me on this, but it may be Siemens and or Square D, that offer a breaker where this is acceptable now, and it has a specific type of lug that will allow you to bring a wire in from the left and from the right. And so we do actually have ways around this now. You can do this, and you can do this safely, but more often than not, we find the practice has taken place on a breaker that does not allow for that type of thing.
Chris, thank you so much for all of your insight and wisdom. If anyone that's listening to this podcast is maybe under contract or they're about to, how can they get a hold of you to book an inspection through your company?
Well, thank you for that. You can find us at rippyinspections.com. And of course, you can reach out to Ginger with a J at 310-889-8191. You can text her as well. We are open 24/7, so feel free to text or call at any time, and we'll get you booked.
That's amazing. And we'll put that information in the podcast notes as well. Chris, thank you so much. Make sure you say hi to Ginger from us here at the LA Real Estate Podcast. Thank you for coming on, and I'm sure we'll be touching base with you in the future with more insight on inspections.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Here's a buyer's tip. Taxes, taxes, taxes. Everybody's favorite topic. Not. Just know that when you buy a home, there are many tax write-offs. Make sure at your tax appointment, when you file your taxes, you tell your accountant if you have bought a property. There are many things that can be written off. If you have a home office in your home, really important to tell your accountant so that you're not leaving any tax money on the table. Justin, we have talked about this before, but actually when I was looking back on some of the history of our podcast, we've been on for years now. It's been many years since we went over the 5 systems in a house. And because we've been talking a lot about inspections, I thought it was really important to go over these briefly. First, the base, the heart, the soul, the foundation of the house. So in LA, we've got houses that are over 100 years old. Foundation. So when you're buying a house, you want to know what kind of foundation the house has.
Yeah, so I'd say, you can usually tell what your foundation's made out of. You're not going to be a foundation inspector, but you can give you some hints. So the oldest and least desirable usually type of foundation is going to be a rock foundation. So the oldest houses, 120-year-old, 130-year-old houses, you'll find these rock foundations. And what happens is the what do we call the
tremors?
The mortar. The
mortar
mortar between the rocks. It eventually sort of becomes powder over the course of 100 years as moisture hits it, and it'll start to float away. And what happens is those rock foundations, because their rocks are irregular shaped, they'll sort of roll out of place. And so that's one of the things that you really want to, if you're going to buy a house with a rock foundation, you want to really have it inspected 100% by a foundation specialist, but just kind of make sure that it's been maintained that whole time and that they've been pointing it and they've been re-mortaring it. Because if nobody's touched that mortar, you can just pull those rocks out sometimes.
Yep.
And same thing goes for the next one, which would be brick.
Mm-hmm.
At least brick, when the mortar fails, they fall on top of each other. And they stack because they're bricks. They don't roll away. But still, you want to make sure that hasn't gotten a lot of moisture damage and that it's been maintained.
And that's those are two pretty tough ones because, yes, a foundation company could come out. They could improve the house, the foundation. They can do a bunch of things. They can brace and bolt. They can re-pour forms. They can jack the house up. However, that comes with inherent risk of all the walls cracking, risk of the windows breaking, risk of doors not being able to open and close properly. So those are kind of a big deal. And so if you find a house you want to buy, you go to do the foundation inspection. The good foundation inspector will actually, and this could be a supplementary to your general inspection. Often, a general inspector will say, "Ooh, hey, I've got some red flags with this foundation. This foundation looks pretty rough. I don't know about this one. You might want to call the foundation guys out." And then at least the foundation companies will be able to give you an estimate and also what that would involve. If it's not that big of a deal, we can put supports here and here and here and here. It's not going to do very much damage. It's going to cost a lot of money. Or, there's a lot of risk with this one and really important. So if you're buying these old, beautiful houses, not necessarily a bad buy, but you need to know what's going on with the foundation. So that's major system number one. Number two, plumbing.
So plumbing system, I think we touched upon this with Chris, but you take a peek under the sink, anywhere if you can see into the crawl space when you're at an open house or something. And what you ideally would see is copper or PEX. PEX is going to be red and blue colored like plastic. Copper, as Chris mentioned, is 3 grades. So just because it's copper, you don't know if it was properly done. I've definitely had inspections where they use the wrong kind of, quote unquote, wrong kind of copper. But most of the time, an older house, you're going to find galvanized steel, and you really, it corrodes. It can be replaced in sections. It's not a deal breaker. You don't have to replace repipe the whole house necessarily with copper, but it would be nice if it was, because eventually it's gonna corrode to the point where it's not viable.
A problem. Another thing to know is that would we all love a house with perfect plumbing and everything's great? Yes, if the house has been replumbed, likely the listing agent is going to advise the seller your house is worth more, you can sell it for more. Mm-hmm. So remember that all these upgrades cost money, potentially will inflate the price of the property as well. So just because a house needs some plumbing work, there's some plumbing issues, not the end of the world. You just want to factor in, what is it going to cost to make it better? Will I improve it doing so? And also, will that increase the value of the house? Because we talk about this on the podcast all the time. We love to buy houses. We love our clients to buy houses that need a bit of work. So when you do the work, then when you go to sell, you can say, hey, you know what? We updated all the plumbing and now this house is more valuable and you have more equity. So not the end of the world, but really important to know the plumbing systems. That includes the drain lines leaving the house, and it includes the sewer line.
Sewer line's the biggest one, right?
Big. So important. We've said this before. So important to know that the sewer line is your responsibility all the way to where it connects in the street to the main line of the city, which could be, again, in the middle of the street. So if your sewer line needs to be replaced, you need to get a city contractor with a permit to go and dig up the entire road. So as you're driving around Los Angeles, you'll see in these beautiful paved roads these weird squares that have been cut out and filled in. Those are all sewer repairs that have been done.
Sometimes if you live on a busy street, it's a tricky permit too.
Yeah.
It can be really expensive. So they were all originally cast iron. That has about life expectancy.
Actually, they used to be clay.
Oh yeah.
back in the day. We still see a lot of clay.
The clays are actually pretty good, but the roots will get into the edges. So, it'll go cast iron and then turn to clay most of the time. So you got about 70, 80 years on the cast iron. The clay will last forever unless trees get in there and crack it.
Yeah.
So definitely get yourself a sewer inspection, camera inspection on every escrow. If your realtor doesn't recommend it, then make sure that you recommend it to yourself.
Every property needs to have a sewer inspection. Unless it's a new build and the city inspector comes out and has inspected it, that's fine. But really, really important to get a sewer inspection. And then also often, many, many, many times, there will be roots in the line, not the end of the world. You should ask the seller to hydrojet the line so that it's clear so you can get the camera down there with the inspector and so you can see the condition. Often there have been repairs done, but very rarely have they carried it all the way to the city connection. So it's really important to know that is your responsibility. If there's an issue, you're paying for it. So make sure you get that inspection done. All right, we've talked about the plumbing. So now, of course, the sister to the plumbing is the electrical. Electrical is a big one. Don't see huge electrical issues in my experience. Often they're a bunch of small repairs. Sometimes a panel will need to be replaced. Couple $1,000. We replaced our panel to our house because we had, Chris Rippy was talking about this one with the plug that's notably not the best for.
Yeah, I had one of those.
Pushmatic, maybe they're called.
I had one of those on my cabin too. They recommended, and we got it replaced in escrow.
Yep. So we just got it redone. Not the end of the world. I feel like there's a lot of really good electricians out there, and so a lot of these things, electrical issues, just they need to be fixed, and whether that's a credit, whether the seller repairs it, or whether and you factored that into your offer that you're going to have to do some work. The main thing about electric is you want your house to be safe.
So on that point, a lot of times there's the DIY dad who's doing some really dodgy stuff with the electric, and that's what you want your inspector to look out for. Just things not being done to code, not being done properly, kind of handyman special stuff that's not right. And I've seen that lots with inside, Romex wired on the outside of the building, just strung around, all sorts of stuff like that. The other thing to keep in mind is just age. I think Chris touched on, the knob and tube, but what he didn't get into is that they didn't have grounded outlets until I think the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. So, you sometimes you'll go into these houses and you'll look and you'll just see the two slats.
That happens a lot, yeah.
And you won't see the little dot.
The third prong.
The third prong,
place to put the prong.
And that's the ground. Or they'll put in the modern outlets that have the ground, but then the inspector will test them and find out, this actually isn't
not grounded. We get that a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
Because think about it. If they'd have to rip, especially if it's plaster walls, rip open the plaster walls, go in, put all new wire, grounded wire through the entire house, drive that ground rod. That costs thousands and thousands of dollars to drive that ground rod. It's got to go like many, many, many feet into the ground, and then ties it to your plumbing to ground the whole house. So, that's something to keep an eye out for, the old-fashioned
the
two-prong covers. But just because you see the third prong doesn't mean it's working.
Yeah. And again, we see that a lot. So that really should be corrected. Okay, number 4, we've got the roof. We spoke about this quite a bit with Chris. The other thing that I see a lot is on roofs that they've put a new vent in or something, and they haven't done the tiling correctly around
the
that.
Flashing. Yeah, they're always doing the flashing.
Flashing's not done correctly. We see that all the time. I feel like there was a bunch of roofers that were all taught by the same person or something that went out and just did them all the same. But we see that a lot. Those should be corrected. Making sure the drainage off the roof is done properly. Knowing the life expectancy of your roof. Many roofs can be, now the shingles 20 to 30 years. I think our roof is a 30-year warranty on our shingles. And so, you just want to know, you want to have the information. How long is it going to be before you likely need to reshingle your roof? Is it 10 years? Is it 20? Does it just need one more layer of shingles? Does it need to be ripped out completely? Are the eaves okay? Is there dry rot? Is there termite? So just information. You need to know all this, and that's the 4th one.
Yeah, a couple things to keep an eye out for at that open house. Look for if you can see if it looks shiny, that's fiberglass. You're not supposed to see that. That means the granules that protect the fiberglass have worn off, like squirrels and branches and stuff rubbing up against it. And yeah, just trying to, does it have gutters? Do the gutters drain away from the house? Just, again, water's the killer. So roof system is super important. I had my roof blow off 3 months after I bought my house. It was not right during the string of 10 atmospheric rivers. It was no fun.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I knew you needed a new roof. So it was,
yeah.
I guess that's the final, you're like, I need a sign. Here it is. Okay, HVAC. So you've got your heating, your air conditioning, keeping your house hot or cold. Really important. And we see a lot of old homes that maybe don't have air conditioning at all. Mm-hmm. And there's some really cool ways around that now with these ductless AC systems.
So the mini splits are great. Just put one in my house. They're fairly inexpensive. They're installed in a day. They're much less expensive than a traditional central air system. Like I said, there's actually great tax credits in the IRA, so you can write off a third of the total project cost, up to $3,000 for mini splits, or actually a bunch of other efficient, if it's efficient enough.
Right. You have to make sure that the efficiency rating is per these programs. Another thing is checking on LA. On the Water and Power, LADWP, and they have rebates as well, and so does the gas company. Yeah. So you want to look on there, but you have to buy specific models that meet their efficiency guidelines. So go on there, and you can get great rebates. So if you're going to do it anyways, buying a house with a really old, malfunctioning air conditioning system, end of the world? Nope. But factor it into your price. Yeah. When you buy it, make sure you have the reserve that you can upgrade it. Again, that should add value to your house when you go to resell.
100%. And, another thing to watch out for with the old systems, the Freon has been outlawed in the state of California. So take a look at that system. How old does it look? Make sure the inspector gives you a date, if they can, and lets you know whether that it uses the old kind of Freon or the kind that we're still allowed to use.
Right. And that's it. That's the 5 major systems of your house. So when you're going to place an offer, these are what you want, give a look over. What's happening with these 5 major systems, so you know what to offer and you know what you're in for. Thank you so much for listening to the LA Real Estate Podcast, your podcast on buying and selling real estate in Los Angeles. Thank you, Justin.webb from the Skelton Group, for joining us today. And a huge shout out to Chris Rippy. Thank you for all the awesome info. Please read the podcast notes if you want to contact us. You're looking for a realtor. That's where you can find us. And also, if you're looking for an inspector, Chris Rippy is your man, and his info is in the podcast notes as well. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we will see you on the next one.